it on Discord. Okay, so welcome everyone. This is meeting number three of standoff meetings. This is a very random group with very awesome people. So today, I was thinking because is Jesse here and also Ian, and Jesse's been working with this amazing like visualizer or explainer of standoff, which is very aligned with what we wanted to do, like with the documentation that we started like last meeting, which is trying to explain the pros and cons and the benefits, and also explaining some implementations and trade-offs and all that. So I don't know. I was thinking that I didn't know that you were going to join very early, Jesse. Very like at the start of the meeting. So I was thinking that I can start like showing how in Minter we use standoff and how we treat that. And maybe then later we can talk about your explainer and see how we can make those concepts, the list that you created yesterday, which was a long list. Was it yesterday? I don't remember.
It was yesterday.
Yeah, it was yesterday. Okay. In your live stream, we can start like filling up that list and putting bullet points, and maybe we can just try to collaborate on that part. How's that?
Sounds great.
Sounds good. This may be something for later, but just in case I'm not around, I was wondering, Jesse, if you're certainly free if you like to use the GitHub project of the standoff property editor inside the explainer if they wanted to have like something kind of interactive standoff region. Awesome. Because yeah, I mean, you can it's just a standalone JavaScript file that takes JSON input, and you could just dump it anywhere, and you could write a binding for it, a directive for it or something.
Yeah. My inspiration for that explainer, I might have covered this on the live stream yesterday, I can't remember, is Bartosz, I can't say his last name, Chichanowski or whatever, has done these explainer articles around sound and how bikes work and engines, and they're incredible because he kind of starts with first principles, and then at each stage he has sort of an interactive visualization as he's explaining each concept, but every visualization is tiny, right? It's not the whole system. Right. And so what I was trying to do with that article, and what I'm hoping to go towards, is kind of taking that same exact idea. So showing how Markdown maps to HTML, like maps to rich text, but only allowing bold and italic and a single line, right? Like you can't even hit return, like it's not a full editor. It doesn't support, headings or any of that other stuff. And so like for people, it basically like giving people just the tiniest little building block that they need to understand the next idea, and then the next idea, and then kind of building up that narrative. And so I don't actually think I would arrive anywhere close to a full editor at the end of the article, but you would end up with like sort of different concepts explained from different perspectives, and each perspective is kind of limited to like helping you understand just that concept so you don't go too far off the rails. So that's kind of the thinking there. I thought your Speedy editor was actually really, really cool, and really neat, like inspirational. And it was like, okay, now how could I take, of the 47 buttons that are on the screen right now, how can I take 3 of those and explain those independently of the other 47 so that you understand what's going on there? So
yeah, that's great. It's a really, really nice article you've got.
Thanks.
Coming.
Nice. Awesome. Can you drop the link of your reference for the explainers
yes,
in the chat, so I can put it in the reference notes too? Awesome. So I'm going to share.
I'm so excited to see Minter. It's been something I've been wanting to look into for a bit.
Let's see if it works. Let's see if it goes well.
May the demo gods be with you, Horatio.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah. Let me just close a bunch of things here. Actually, I'm starting a new like account. So there's nothing here. Actually, you know what? I'm not gonna do the whole onboarding. It's silly. So Minter is it's this application that let you write content, let you write publications and collaborate with others in the peer-to-peer network. It's everything local first. It works offline. It has a bunch of like algorithms to merge stuff that happen concurrently, and it's magic. And also we can let you publish to the web. This is like the latest thing that we are doing. So right now it's a very simple application that you can actually write whatever you want. You have different block elements. You can have also headings. Now it's broken. So for example, I can do that, and hello world, and now the headings is not like properly like showing up, but I added this in order to see the actual underlying structure that we are using in the editor. Then we can this is not where standoff like is being used. It's actually being used when we stored everything to the backend. So it will be easy to see, okay, this is what the editor is consuming, which is a JSON structure, hierarchical structure. And then I can show you the transformations that we do in order to store standoff in the backend. So let me just remove everything. So we have like this, we have this concept of, because the editor can have hierarchy. So we can have multiple hierarchies in different like different block levels. We have the first item of a document, which is this, is a group. So we have a very strict way of storing the data, because of this like limitations of, or this like constraints that we decided that we wanted to use, which is we wanted to let people use hierarchy. We wanted to let people like write like paragraphs or blocks with different types, and this is what we come up with. So every document has just one child, let's say, and it's going to be a group type. It could be a group, it could be another list or order list, whatever you prefer. And let me just open. Okay, so I don't know why it's that way, but and then you have the only children that a group can have are blocks. So the text block that we have is statements, and statement has an ID, and this is the identifier of this block inside this document. That's why it doesn't have to be like this like long ID, because the document already have a very long ID. So we don't have to have this ID like universally unique. So inside this statement, then we have another constraint, which is because of the hierarchy. The first element or the first child of a block, it should always be the content of the block. So in this case, it's a paragraph. And inside the paragraph, then we have the text. And you see here that like it's very hello world. And then if I do bold or italic, then it breaks. And then you have this, like, this is a very normal like behavior of an editor in the web. Like this is how it is. So
Horatio, is this a custom editor that you guys wrote?
No, it's a Slate. It's Slate.js.
It's Slate. Okay.
This is Slate.js in the
just
as a
quickly,
library.
What is a block? I mean, so what definition would you point? Where did the term come from? Okay,
so the term, I believe it's a very mainstream term, comes from this new paradigm or new era of editors or rich text editors in the web, which essentially TLDR, a block is a paragraph. Like I will define it as it is. But
well, so in a sense, it is Engelbert's purple numbers.
There you go. There you go. You got it. You got it. So it's Engelbert's purple numbers. That's
I think the other inspiration for blocks though is the DOM itself, where basically in CSS land you have display block and display inline, and then display inline block and a lot of other displays. No, if you ignore all of those, that's a nice tie-in actually, because I mean
because I mean the join I was just trying to make was sort of pre and post web, because a lot of these
Yes.
things start within the paradigm of the web, which of course came from something else before, and that's not to make it better or worse at all. That's sort of not my perspective. It's really just drawing the dots, mainly because there's lots of really cool stuff left in the long grass of hypertext, which has got forgotten when the web came along, which is why I think it's fun to draw these connections.
Yeah, and actually, you said you created a very good connection with Engelbart, because this is something that we're very passionate about. Like our main sources are Engelbart, Ted Nelson, and of course like Vannevar Bush, like his idea of having a trail of knowledge. So the fact that we have an ID here is just a unique representation, but the position of that specific block, we can generate this purple ID, and then we can translate from that purple number to this ID, so we can have a unique like a unique way, or an easier way for people to reference until character level. So that's one of the cool things about what we're doing. So yeah, so essentially blocks are the way to represent like the minimal representation of a concept in a system. In our case, it's a block is a paragraph, but in other places maybe a block could be the whole document itself. I don't know, but in our case, a block is a paragraph, and then you can nest, you can indent, you can create as many hierarchies as you want. There's also one little detail that we have, is that whenever you have a heading, we are forcing everything to be below the heading, because headings are actually are tied to whatever
Semantic
it's
meaning.
below. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're not letting you, well, of course you can do this and then you're writing another block, but essentially this is
So you even force indentation. So you not only tie it together conceptually, you also tie it together visually by forcing an indent underneath the heading. It's interesting.
We're playing with this. I don't know if we are actually going to do it that much visually in the end, because it's a little bit weird, or maybe we need to have more affordances. We need to test. I don't know, but the fact that right now is visually indented, it's not a full requirement. What it's required is that if it's a heading, whatever is below until the next heading should be like below.
I actually really like that. The first time I started exploring a Markdown AST, I was actually surprised that Markdown ASTs are not implemented that way. So a heading is like a standalone thing, and a paragraph tag immediately following that paragraph tag, even though it's a tree, it's an abstract syntax tree, they're like sibling elements, as opposed to like a child.
Have a strict like relation between them. So,
and as I was using the abstract syntax tree, I wanted the children underneath the heading to be related to it. Like I wanted to use that property, and I found out that Markdown doesn't represent things that way, which was a surprise. So I actually think the way that you're doing it was more intuitive to me before I was told differently.
Nice, awesome, great. So yeah, this is like the way that we're dealing with this, and now everything's broken. I don't know. Demo gods again. So hello world. Let's do another one. Boom. Okay, now we have it here. So we have this document right here, and then you see that we can actually copy that block. We can see that block published to the web, which is here too, and it should be there soon. Let me just.
You guys are using IPFS for publishing, right?
Yep. Yeah, this is being published to IPFS, and actually I can show you whenever I copy this, I can show you oh, we're doing some crazy things with the copying. So let me just go. Oh, here it is. It's an empty document. There you go. Maybe I was too early to get that. I wanted to open my code editor. Here it is. Okay, so now if I paste here, you see that the document itself, we have this special handle, and then we have a document ID, which has also a version and then the block ID.
Mm.
So with this link, we can go and create a new document, a new draft, and say hello, and paste this, which doesn't seem to be different, but it's actually linking to this other document right here. So right now, maybe I broke, I'm fixing a bunch of things, and I broke the visible connections, which is something that Ted Nelson was also passionate about, that you can see the visually connected everything in the document. But essentially, this paste that I did right here is not pasting the content, but it's pasting the reference to that content. And we are taking that reference and render the content of the content that is inside that reference. So essentially, people cannot edit this. I can edit here, but I cannot edit this particular piece because it's coming from another place. So, and that,
just
go.
quickly, so effectively you're doing a transclusion there.
Yes, that's a transclusion.
And are you, and that transclusion is actually tied to that source?
Yes.
So if that source changes, the reason I ask is quite interesting, that this is much closer to Ted's idea. In other words, if you needed to change, well, he went, it was worse. If you made a typo, for instance, you had to make a new
Yes.
source.
There you go.
So you could then transcode, because,
Yeah.
and he mentioned that because the whole MediaWiki has transclusion built all over, but virtually none of it is actually the transclusion you're doing here. What they're really doing is server-side includes with templates.
Yeah.
But
So
they've used the same term, which rather confuses the meaning.
yeah, so we have
Mhm.
different ways to reference to pieces of content. We're now able to reference block content, like the smallest element that we can represent right now or reference is a block. But we are working on we're working hard on to let you reference to character level. So then and you said it right. So when you are creating a transclusion, you're forcing the one that is making the transclusion, if you want that to create a new version, to create a new immutable reference, right? Or immutable like state. So in our case, you are not forced to do that. The default one is your reference to the immutable like version of it. As you can see here, you have this document ID, and then you have a version of that document ID, and you have the reference for the block. But if you strip out the version and you
get the most recent version by default.
you get the latest.
Yeah,
you
that's
get
very
the
cool.
latest. Yeah. This is not the default one because things might break in this way, because if I remove the block from that from the latest version, then you're not going to be able to get that reference like back again. That's why we put the version over there, because we believe that at the moment it's more important that when you're creating that reference, you're creating that transclusion, you keep all the context, or keep like the actual thing that was happening when you're writing.
Or you reference when you reference it, you're referring to a fixed content. Like I think about this a lot when we're linking to things on the web. You know, I linked you guys just now to Bartos's articles, for example, and an archives page. That page could go away. He could change the URL. Like he could add 4 new articles to it. The 4 new articles at the top could be terrible and not representative of the thing that I was trying to point you guys to. And so what I really wanted you to see was like, here are the most recent articles from Bartos that are similar to the thing that I'm trying to do. But because there's no versioning or content addressing or some of these, you know, concepts on the web, we have this like moving target. And so my referent, it could shift out from underneath me. So I do think it's really great that you're defaulting to like this fixed version is the thing that I'm trying, especially when you're trying to transclude it into a document. You're like, no, I mean these words, not words that you decide to come up with later. Like, these are the ones that are important.
These are the ones, I know. And
the author. Yeah, I mean, because if you're authoring, absolutely, and if say, well, I mean, whether you're sort of doing something technical like documentate, or you're maybe just doing, you know, close annotation of a source, you absolutely want to know that that's not within what you're writing, that isn't that sand, that ground won't shift under your feet. And
yeah, you can for sure from that reference, if you get new versions, you can actually go to the latest. Like you're gonna be able to go. And actually, I wanted to show that. So because I have this,
Yeah,
and
I want a UI affordance around when I'm transcluded something for there to be like a dot or something, or like a see recent version, or like more recent version available,
yes,
kind of like on Amazon when you're looking at a book and it's like, hey, there's a more recent version of this book available. You sure you want to buy, version 2, version 3 came out 2 years later. That's like really helpful to know. And I might be like, no, I actually want version 2. But I would love for like that to be able to go see that new thing, and then maybe even like diff in document and be like, yep, I actually like these changes better. Like I'd like to update my referent to point to the most recent text. Like those
yep.
kind of affordances would be, gosh, this would be really amazing as an
So-
editor.
So yeah,
Um,
in right now we have like a list of versions. It's very raw, as you can see. You can see
Mhm.
that the new one is version 2. But if I'm seeing the latest, the first one, I actually have this like banner over here that says, "Hey, you are not in the latest version," and you're not in the latest version that this machine has, like because you can be like offline, or you can be like people can write as many versions as they want, and then until you don't receive them, then you don't see it. Yes, because it's everything is local. And here when I publish, I'm creating these versions, these citations here actually, and you can see the citation, and I can go back to that document and see where was that cited. But okay, so that's a lot about Minter. Let's go to the code so you can see that what standoff, how we're using standoff actually. So you were seeing the editor, you were seeing how that was being used in the front end in the actual rich text editor. And here it's how we are transforming that into the backend. Actually, I'm gonna just pull the test because that will be easier. So here you see that I have this same block, which is it's a statement, which is a block with this ID, and then the paragraph is hello world. So this is translated to just this block with this attribute called text. It's separated. There's no like hierarchy here. Okay. And the moment that we add, let's see, this is a heading here. The moment that we add like this formatting, which this is what creates this hierarchy inside the editor, then we translate that to just a text, and then we have a list of annotations that is attached to this block. And the way that we are actually tying this annotation with the text is by Unicode code points. So we know that from the zero, like the zero index, which is the space between the space before the first letter, because we're like the index is not the actual letter, or the character is the space in between, are the spaces in between. So from 0 to the 2, which is here, the type of that annotation is strong. And then from here that, and we do this for every formatting. We do that also for like you see here that we can do overlapping. So here we have 3 words, and is has both the strong and the emphasis. And then we are here just rendering 2 annotations. And that's because we don't really care about how many elements does it have. If the whole span or the whole text or the range is until 1 point, then that's where it's going to stop. So the range for strong is coming from here to here, and then the range from emphasis going from here to here. And this is what we are representing in this annotation list. Yeah, I mentioned this to Jess the other day, but we also consider emojis, which is not like funny, which is not fun to work with, but emojis have like, they don't, the length of those emojis are not just 1 character, are multiple characters depending on which emoji. So if we want to have like this text to be strong from families, so we need to take in consideration that. So you see that the number it's way higher than the amount of characters that we can see, but it's because of the nature of emojis. Also, the way that we're doing links is kind of interesting. We are also creating annotations for those links, and then we attach attributes to those annotations, very similar to what Ian is doing in his editor, because every annotation can have as many attributes as you want. And then what else I can show? So links, we can do overlapping links too. It's very hard to represent that in the front end in a web page, but at least we are able to do it in the source of the in the data layer of Minter. Linked with marks, this is just to check that any indentation also is being respected. And then images and media, it's also something that we support. And what we do is that we use this special character to create just one like space, and that space is what is we are annotating to, and then we can add attributes and say, okay, this is a type image, and then you can do whatever you want. And then I wanted to also show transclusions, our transclusions, which is very similar to an image. We have this embed, and then the same way we are using the same like special character, and then we attach attributes, which is just the Minter reference to that thing. And I wanted to show also the fact that this is a start and an end is because I wanted to show that. Let me see if there's one that has that. I don't think I have a test for this, but it does work like this. So imagine you have a text that has multiple bold words in the same text. So instead of having one annotation per word that is bold, we have just one annotation that says, hey, this is type strong. And then it starts from all these indexes and it ends in all those indexes. So we wrap, compact the amount of annotations that we put in a block. So there's not gonna be a way that you can create two strong annotations inside a block. So instead of doing like, for example, I'm just making this up, from 25 to 32, instead of doing this, what we're doing is just putting here 25 and putting here 32. And
Why?
this is, sorry?
Why?
Why? Because we want to keep the identity, like annotations in the system has also identity. So the fact that I can have the identity of an annotation, it's confirmed from the type and all the attributes. And this makes it simpler to understand where those things come from. It's not very important for formatting in this case. It's more important for attributes, for annotations that conforms more attributes like links, or for example, references to other Minter blocks. That's what we are using this for. And then this can be also represented inside the database as a just one reference, and then we can just translate that into the system properly. So we chose this limitation. I need to this is something that we did like 2 years ago, something like that. I need to remember. I don't remember actually what was the main reason. That was one of the main reasons, like to keep identity and help the system to understand, okay, there's all these annotations, there's all these ranges that conforms this annotation, so we can do like other crazy things about referencing and all that. But this is the solution that we came up with.
So what's happened if this is multiplayer and two people create links or bolds? How do you remain? Or retain information about who did it, or do you compact that as well? Or
right now, if you see, let me just go. No, I broke. I turn off the app. So anytime you create a new version, like right now, Minter is not multiplayer, so you cannot actually like connect with anyone and start writing both at the same time. It's more of creating immutable data. So you write yourself and then you publish it. But then the moment that you get another change from another person or another version is where the merge happens. Right now, the merge happens at the block level. So any block has a revision ID, and this revision is pointing to the version that block was created or changed. So right now it's last write wins. So if I write a block and I publish it, and then you take that document and you create a new version and you write in the same block, then the block that's going to prevail is yours, because we do last write wins at this moment for blocks. But in the future, we'll be able to see, okay, you change these characters, you add these characters, you remove these characters, or you change this annotation, and then we can attach ownership to each change or at character level. But right now, that's not the way it works.
Horatio, if I'm understanding this correctly, you're only doing standoff within each individual block. You're not doing standoff across the entire document. In other words, a document is a list of blocks. Within each block, you use standoff to represent the content within it. Is that right?
As it's currently right now, yes. The hierarchy is stored also in the backend. It's not been like treated as a standoff. But I mean, we were more limited to the fact that it was easier to do this in the editor that we are working on, instead of just trying to do everything in standoff. But we're not discarding that to do it in the future, that also hierarchy and the list also is standoff. So no, there's no one whole text of the document and then we put standoff. Everything is one text per block in the document. So
yeah, one of the things that I've run into, and I've only been working with standoff for like a few months now, so I'm fairly new to it, but it does seem like there's some challenges in representing blocks in standoff. Like there's different trade-offs there, and including hierarchical information. And yeah, I don't mean to say that it's not possible. I'm just saying that it introduces some complexity and you have to make some decisions about how to represent it. In fact, when I was writing my explainer, my intention is to go through about half the article using only a single line of text. Like you can't hit return. Like you won't be able to hit return in any of the visualizers. It's just going to be, assume you have a single line of text and you want to represent annotations within this line of text. And that's again, that concept of like, don't overload them with information they don't need to know until later. And then somewhere at the explainer article, I want to say, but we're often dealing with more than one line of text. So what do we do now? And then kind of start to expand how you might deal with that.
Yeah, we discussed this in the last meeting. Like there's actually nothing stopping us to doing that. Because the same way that we use like this special character for images and transclusions, we can do the same for starting a block, ending a block. So it's actually nothing like that prevents us to do that. The thing is that
the question I would have, and maybe this is something where Ian could jump in as well, is how would you represent hierarchy among blocks? Would that be a parent and child relationship on the attributes of the blocks, or?
Yeah, I mean, basically, I mean, I would make the distinction between a standoff text block, let's say, or text stream, which could be an entire, for example, I mean, this is how I began originally with the editor in GitHub. Everything was just one long string. And a paragraph was represented by a line break character, and this was, treated as in the editor space, it's converted into a line break. Then I moved to a more internally in the editor, I moved to more of a document, a block structure with divs representing paragraphs. It still has the same export structure as a single line of text, but internally it's converted into div blocks with standoff with text inside those blocks, which for some things makes it a lot easier to deal with visually. But I think as well, I mean, I think of that as being like the content of an XML element, the text in between the tags is, you can think of it that way. And then if you think about an XML file, you have multiple XML elements with text inside multiple elements. So I think there's no reason why you can't have, standoff at a kind of minimal standoff would be something that describes a text string. But you could have what I call like a standoff document, which is a collection of text strings and annotations, and you then have to make that. I think the practical choice would be to set those character offsets relative to the start of each block. But I mean, or you could do it to the start of the whole document. But if you have a block structure, then you could represent things like outlines as well, which are simply hierarchical and transcluded structures.
Yes.
So I think there's no, I mean, you're just talking about like a more overarching structure, an outliner structure, for example.
Right.
There's no reason why you can't do that. I mean, why not? And to come back to your question that how representing standoff relationships, there's one example of where in Codex, I generate a syntax tree. You can hit a button and get a syntax tree. And all that annotation is converted into standoff and associated with the text. And each of those tokens in the syntax tree is connected to, for example, if there's a noun phrase or verb phrase, each of the tokens is connected to another standoff property which represents the noun phrase. And you can the whole structure of the syntax tree is captured and represented as standoff, and the connections between those standoff properties is represented as being, this property is connected to this property.
Mm-hmm. So you do use the attributes in that case. Yeah.
I think, well, in Codex's case, I encode that structure in the graph because everything is converted into a graph model. So it's not just a text document with standoff data.
Right.
That text document and data is then converted into a graph model, which enables me to run operations upon the standoff itself in the graph. So that syntax tree exists within the graph.
That was actually going to be one of my questions around that, Ian, is like, so could I ask the question of one of your documents, how many paragraphs are in this document? And then without having to scan the text string, have the standoff know? Like, is that, are those paragraphs represented as annotations themselves?
Yes, that's correct. They're represented as a text block annotation. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So that's how you handle blocks. And then the simple thing that I'm trying to do, which seems simple in practice, is I'd love to write a markdown editor that saves to standoff and then uses standoff to HTML to convert, like the simplest possible interchange format that I could think of. The one that is not simplest, but the one that would be most used by people today, right? People writing in Obsidian and LogSeq and all these other things are writing in, Markdown, but then it's saving to Markdown, which has all these limitations to it. But if we could give them a standoff substrate underneath there, and then you don't have to give up your Markdown. You can still write in a Markdown editor. But guess what you get because of all of this? Well, you can also open this same file and we can show them. You can. Exactly. I want to a bridge to help people adopt a standoff and then kind of go from there. So one of the simple structures that's in Markdown is you can have lists of arbitrary indentation. I was trying to figure out, how do I represent that in standoff?
I've got alignment and indentation in standoff as well, because again, it's just a meaning and an intent. It's just an attribute that you're applying to a range of text. Okay. And it's up to the editor, the code that the user interacts with, to decide how do I visually map that? Do I put an alignment? Do I do something fancy? But I think I take your point, and I think maybe that's where some the tools like the @JSON library could be quite useful to take, to maintain conversion between a sort of source of truth standoff, which can then be projected into a text editor, like a markdown editor, but then you'd have to be kind of keep careful watch over. I think that when you're writing things back to that standoff source of truth, that you're not obliterating something or losing something there. I think
that is the trick.
preference.
Don't touch
I think
annotations that
maybe,
you don't know about, basically. Like annotations should be additive from the editor to the standoff document.
That's right. So I think, you could even build something that looks like a markdown editor, but basically is actually a standoff property editor under the hood, so that everything is aligned and nothing is lost. But it could then be projected to HTML or Markdown.
Alan, you raise your hand. You wanted to.
Well, yeah, I raised my hand because I don't want to get in the way of the nature of this conversation. I have kind of broader questions that I really think are important to tackle, but I don't want to mess up the flow because I love what's going on. So I just raised my hand to say, hey, something, but I don't have to do it now.
Okay. Well, if you don't mind, you can just do it. Like, that's fine.
Okay, I'll jump in, but I don't expect, I don't want this to change the course of the conversation. I want y'all to keep going. So this is a very technical or in the weeds kind of, like you're working with material, and that's awesome. What I would love to see at some point, though, we all have a feeling about Markdown, but one of the things it does well is that it has a very clear scope, right? This is what you can do with Markdown. With Standoff, I think especially for a lot of people who are just hearing about it, it's not clear what is metadata, what is Standoff, who owns what is the better thing to put in there? Is it for, like, the most of this conversation is around the idea of, hey, you can throw your HTML, you can throw your markup and perhaps other things into Standoff, right? But the conversation that I haven't heard too often, I mean, Ian and I, we used to talk about this way back in the day, right? Do we have an understanding of really what it's capable of, or is the only way to figure out what it's capable of by working through this hard stuff? And why I think it's more than just sort of like a philosophical or design question is pretty soon there's going to be a kind of come to Jesus moment or come to GPT moment where there's a question of, like, what can GPT do that would solve 90% of the things that Standoff is good for, right? I've kind of thought through that, and I feel like, oh, there are ways where GPT could totally automate a lot of this stuff. So I'm interested in actually Standoff as almost an exploration of a different kind of UI, not just a different kind of back-end structure, right? I think there's a lot of possibility in both directions. Jess's interface that you're working on, I love, because it's like zooming down into the words themselves and turning it into the interface, right? Rather than hiding it. It's like, hey, here's the whole big focus. And that's such an interesting angle. But I'd like to have that conversation at some point, because I think that's in the spirit of the explainer that you're putting together. I would love to see a Standoff explainer that is like a manifesto. Maybe not a manifesto, but like, here's the things that it can do. Here's the community. Come join. Let's figure this out. Let's see if this is worth pursuing. There we go. That's my.
If I can jump in for a sec, because I think this may touch on something we talked about last time as well. It's, if it not exactly mapped, but I think there's some overlap there, and that was the question of the question of who are you marketing Standoff to? Because I think there are different groups you can market Standoff to who have different needs. And for example, anyone who has a need to create annotation of text is very close to understanding what standoff could do for them straight away, I think. Particularly someone who's looking at, like multiple contributors, or has gone to Amazon Turk, or is using machine learning in order to, up to, say somebody who is doing syntax annotation of a text. They definitely understand these problems as a day-to-day thing. But then if you're talking about the average person, okay, let's say, wind the clock back to 2019 and, Roam Research comes around, and what kind of blew people's minds was that, you could add a kind of intentionality within the text using these brackets. But you also sacrifice a lot. I mean, in the sense that you have to learn a bit of this notation in order to get styling back in. You don't get styling for free. It's not rich text like Word. So you have to kind of be a bit technical in order to get what you're used to getting back, and you don't get a lot of what you had before, that you could take for granted, tables and all the stuff. Now, I would actually say that with a standoff editor, in many ways, a standoff text editor has an advantage over a markdown editor, which is always imposing the notation on you. So you're having to write it and you're having to see it, even if it's been transformed in live view, you're still involved in a way with notation. And a lot of the other editors, you don't get the WYSIWYG experience, but with standoff, you can get the WYSIWYG experience straight away. There's actually, so for example, in Codex, the user is not exposed to standoff at all. Like there's no window with ranges and annotation types and attributes. That information is in the advanced section, and you have the tooling there to tweak that, to move an annotation around or something. But it's deliberately designed to feel like a WYSIWYG interface. So in that point of view, you might ask the question, well, is that selling standoff to a user? I would say, well, it's not. It's not selling standoff to the user in the sense of marketing, trying to market standoff to the user. It's saying, look, here's a WYSIWYG system. Oh, but by the way, you can also, instead of just highlighting and underlining, you can now point to an entity in this database that you've created, that you're building. Or you could do a whole bunch of other types of annotations that your business might need that you could never do in Word. So my opinion is, rather than worrying about how do you market a technical thing like standoff to people, embrace the fact that it's actually easier to do WYSIWYG and rich text, and just give it to them and show them, oh yeah, either the extra super highlighting things that you can do that you could never do before, and then let them kind of explore the buttons or the tools that are attached to that document that allow them to go, oh, okay, so if I highlight this thing, that gives it this meaning, which was never available to me in Word, but now I can see it's referencing some other document or some part of the graph or some special function or something. So I think you don't even have to use, or paradoxically, I don't think you even have to use the term standoff to get through to people. And I would even say, try and avoid that. That's my experience, because it's very hard to translate these concepts to even a technical audience. There's a lot of resistance to hierarchical content. There's a lot of wanting to hold on to that, XML structure as being something that people can go and directly edit in a text document. So I think I would focus on the capabilities in the UI and in the UX, and don't worry about the format until you're doing something like what Blaine is doing at Condé Nast, interchanging documents. I think that's almost like the icing on the cake. I think.
I think
it's just my 2 cents on it.
That's excellent, and I'll just add in there. I think it's a good conversation to have because there are so many aspects of doing a text editor just right. In these days, the table stakes are so high, you know, like, so if you just go for trying to solve all the problems, you're never going to get there. And I think it is important to say, like, we want to solve these problems. So the idea of marketing to builders, like Jess said, that's a good angle, because that like Twilio, that's like, hey, you're still gonna have to solve all these problems yourself, but this will solve this set of problems.
I mean,
It's nice to-
Sorry.
I believe the fact that the stakes of the rich text editor in the web is so high, it could be limited. It could be way smaller if everything was based on something as simple as just, hey, let's call it layers. You can put this layer on top, and is the bold bold layer, and you can use it. But you're still editing text. That's it, no more. Or you want paragraphs. Okay, so here's the other layer, and here's the other layer, and you can compose and add those layers on top if you want to. But but that's very, like, it's very hard to right now. It's really hard to mix both worlds. So it's either you are in one side or the other. And for example, in our case, we just like accept the fact that in the editor it's just going to be one way of working with the data, and in the backend is going to be another way. So that's the trade-off that we accepted until we get really brave to do everything with stand-up, but not now. But at least that's the way it is. And it's very interesting what you said, like, okay, it's easier, yes, but now the stakes are this. So there is a balance, there is a trade-off. So
I actually think we can go beyond though. I don't think we even have to talk about, we don't even have to worry about, you know, can we achieve parity with Microsoft Word or something, as in like kind of the holy grail of the average person's experience with rich text editing. In some ways, we can go way beyond that. I mean, I don't know if you've seen what Adam is doing, Adam Vern on this call. You know,
no,
what he has done with, you know, rich text and styling is you know, phenomenal. And I've dabbled a little bit with that, you know, with SVG and JavaScript. Like in many ways, like Standoff just allows you to, I kind of think of, you know, if you think like, you know, when you have a range or something, which is a Standoff thing, and you have it in your editor space, you can think of it almost like a magic highlighter. It can be programmed to do anything. It's almost like it's like a React component. You know, now on top of your text document, you've got a whole bunch of React components that can do magic. You know, and the most boring thing it can do is do italics and bold. That's like the base level. But who knows what the limits are? You know, when you've got UI experts like Adam, you know, who can do real magic with it. And I think we're just tapping the potential of what Standoff can do as a creative medium for people to express themselves in text. Yeah, we might be able to get to like some level of Figma-like creativity with text and bring back a kind of personal quality to writing that has been just completely, you know, excluded from the web because of its, you know, rigid limitations of HTML and rich text editors built on that. So I think in some ways, yeah, we have to build these things and show them to people, show them what you can do. But it's a lot easier to build this stuff, I found, you know, because you can define what your Standoff tags do. You can tell them, well, give it a behavior. You can actually implement your own renderer per Standoff property. You know, not so easy to do in other things, although, you know, the really sophisticated editors like CodeMirror and ProseMirror give you a lot of power in that area too. But I think, yeah, I don't think it's a case of dropping. We don't have to sacrifice style for function. I think Standoff has the potential to give both of them at a higher level.
Adam, do you want to Yeah, you raise your hand first, so.
Yeah, I want to follow with on one of the superpowers of standoff that I see is not with linear, ordinary, bold and italic text, because we already have that and it works well enough for those ordinary use cases, and may be hard to pull people away from their words and their markdowns. But one of the real superpowers is handling non-linear text. It could be spatialized text where the blocks, there is no start, no beginning. It could be spatial hypertext hybrid. It could be pure hypertext block to block where things, and all those combinations, and even in mid-sentence that we can have sentences. It's just a typewriter thinking sentences. So the sentences could be split off and combined together. We could have more graphical representations that actually follows the chain of thought or the structure of the argument. For example, nowadays, or we have for a long time used a comma for everything to make lists in sentences and or to separate thoughts and add pauses, and we could. Oh, sorry, my camera has a 30-minute limit here. So with standoff, it's so much easier to handle those non-linear cases because you can thread things together, character by character, or word by word, or sentence, or block by block, or document by document. But we can thread things together in very new ways, and I think non-linear text is the real one of the paths forward. And I think there are so many spatial canvases right now. And there is also the opportunity to take something block-based and do a non-linear block-based standoff as well. And that is what I've explored most. And also intra-sentences, like graphical text, where it follows. If you look at an old book by a good typographer or graphical designer or thinker with some sort of artistic ability, the text is not, it can look fantastic and really be evocative and play chords in our minds that are very different. And I really think we should get there because we're really following a typewriter tradition too much.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I think it's imperative that we get there. I think we sometimes have to frame these things, in moral terms. And like one argument I've made for standoff is from a moral angle, is that if you're dealing with embedded markup, you're dealing with something which is inherently limited to one author and one point of view in terms of the annotations that you're making upon that. If you're editing Markdown, you have no idea, like you don't have the collaboration inherent within that document. You don't have, if you're even at XML, or HTML, adding attributes, it's very hard to keep track of who is doing what and who is adding or subtracting or decorating. But a system built on standoff with that at its core, it's in that sense pluralistic. It accepts lots of contributions and allows you to pick and choose between them. In the editor, like, I want these, I don't want these. And you can imagine situations where something has perhaps been heavily annotated in a group scenario, and a group facilitator could look for overlaps and where things match or where things don't match, and look at using that as a way of getting insight into a text. But I think as well, we've accepted, the limitations, the very severe limitations of, text area and, Markdown and rich text editors in terms of how they can express themselves spatially, which we are used to doing on paper. Like you don't even have to give someone all of these tools or expect them to become artists, but, that things are so locked down that we don't even notice how limited and how suffocating it is. And giving people just a little bit of freedom, a bit of air, to breathe can do wonders for engaging parts of the brain, for creating and seeing connections. So I think there's an absolute necessity for a spatial approach to text going forward if we are to unlock more creative reasoning, I think. And so in that sense, it's also partly a moral thing. It's about giving people back, making the tools work for us and not us having to slave away to these very limited tools, I think. And I think Standoff is one part of that solution.
Awesome. Mark, Jess, who wants to?
I'm far away.
Go ahead,
This
Mark.
might seem rather trite as the sort of the conversation's moved on, but I was thinking back to the Alan's sort of opening question to Ian. I was thinking, well, one thing it's doing is it's getting rid of these wretched things. It's not that you can't use one if you really want to, but conversations will happen sort of in the Future Text Caucus about highlighting. And one of the things that struck me was just how much of a slave people were to physical models that we're trying to move away from. People wanted they wanted the sort of the visual tellback of highlighting, but forcing yourself to sort of take your digital thoughts, put them on facsimile PDF paper, and then draw colored boxes on them just seems kind of dumb, especially when you get no extra affordance from it or very little. And so one way this sort of approach I think is at a quite simple level is quite literally, you don't need these anymore. You can use them if you want to, especially obviously if you're working on paper, but it's that you don't have to. And I think that's just tremendously free.
Yeah, I was going to say to that point of marketing to builders, I was talking to a product manager guy who's working on a futuristic system, and they're building they have a decentralized graph database thing underneath the covers, and they're building a Notion clone to show off the affordances that you get with that to the average user and to builders and that kind of stuff of hey, check it out how easy it is to build a Notion clone in that thing. And I said, give me 5 minutes. I want to pitch you on the way that you should represent text in this editor that you're building right now. Let me explain standoff markup. And I just went through the basic explanation and then a couple of different UI UX things. And within 5 minutes, he's been thinking deeply about this, how to do this. And so within 5 minutes, he was like, I am absolutely 100% sold. I can represent all of these annotations as elements in my graph database that I already have, that already synchronizes between all of my clients. He's and he said, one of the things that was really interesting, because I got to watch him go from never having heard of this to totally, we're going to build this in 5 minutes. And one of the things he said was, you had me at query the document like a database. So apparently that was I mentioned this in chat, apparently that was a really interesting and compelling case for him of the fact that the annotations themselves, the nature of the document would be separated and be able to be represented in a way that you could query it, that you could interact with it, and that kind of stuff. So I do think there's a case here for marketing to the builders. And so the article that I'm working on is more of a teaching text than a marketing text, although there's marketing woven into it as well. And so I'm thinking of it pedagogically of let me work it, assuming that you're not building your own editor, which most people are not and have not thought about this deeply. They've used Markdown. Maybe they've even used a Markdown to HTML conversion library, right? They did an npm install, passed to MD, MD to HTML, and they ran the code. So they're a developer, and they think that they thought maybe once or twice about how you might encode rich text. But I want to walk them through gently, but then towards the end of the article, really blow their mind with some of these UI UX. It's now that you can do this, have you thought about this? And kind of just show some examples that are really mind-blowing, like the one that I worked on in the end of last year that started taking me down this path was a Kanban board and a Markdown document. And you can edit the Markdown document and the Kanban board updates automatically, and you can drag the Kanban board around and the Markdown document updates automatically. And when I showed this to Blaine Cook, he was like, you should implement this in Standoff. And I was like, tell me more. And that kind of started me down this path of realizing oh, Standoff as an application format would be another interesting way to frame Standoff. It's not a document format, it's an application format. So
Standoff as an application format. That's a very powerful statement. Damn it.
I think that's all the more reason to it would be great. Like everybody should make their own standoff and make their own tools and everything, but as an application format, that speaks to kind of like if we can agree on some best practices before things, get out there, right? So that it actually can be an interchange format and doesn't, become something yet another protocol that's tedious, like all the different flavors of Markdown. That's the tricky question. You just leave it open and just let the good ideas bubble to the top, or do you kind of
Yeah,
figure-
To
and the
channel
fact-
to channel Gordon Brander for a second. We want to let 1,000 standoffs bloom. Like this is not standoff is not a format. It's a data structure. And we want to teach people about that data structure and the power of using it. But the fact that Ian represents indentation as a way of representing lists and @JSON uses each list item as a block, which refers to the parent, that's fine. It's just different ways of using the data structure. And protocols or formats work best when they're emergent from use cases as opposed to top-down specified by like a standards body. So I think we're all about standoff as the data structure and the user interface things that it enables, but we may all have slightly different ways of representing our standoff documents, and that's okay.
Yeah, I agree. I think, as long as an agreement upon the fundamental parts of what standoff means as a system of referencing text strings, then it's up to you how much or how little you do with that. And I think then it's up to the community to say, well, can someone implement a converter from codex standoff JSON to app JSON? And then you've got, because the great thing about standoff is it's so granular. It makes so few assumptions about the thing that you're decorating, the text stream, that the code that converts from here, from A to B, should be relatively simple and relatively robust, because you don't have to make assumptions about grammar where you do with Markdown or anything else. You've got to make assumptions about, there's always special exceptions, with grammar, but there is no grammar with standoff. It's just it's a structure with some very, very few essential properties, which could be negotiated, I think.
Yeah, and it seems like, oh, there's no grammar, so there's no meaning, but it's actually the opposite. It gives more meaning to everything. So that's exciting. Yeah, this is awesome. I'm gonna take this link too. So okay. I don't know how much time we were in, maybe 1 hour, a little bit more than 1 hour. I mean, we can stop here if you want to, but I would like to at least touch a little bit more on Jest Explainer and see what are the next challenges, and maybe we can just chat like a little bit about it and help with this, because it's kind of interesting, the idea. What do you all think?
Yeah, I can do another 15 minutes or something. So like that. I know it's getting really late for Ian.
Yeah.
The other thing I'd love to do is find like a monthly time that actually works well for Ian and where I am the most inconvenienced, because it feels like Europe, or like we can like rotate so that there's like a standing time and we don't have to play calendar chess, 3D calendar chess at that every single time. And I'm happy to like bounce back and forth between 2 time slots or whatever, and then and stay up late or get up early for one of them and that kind of thing.
Well, I think basically, I mean, I would love to do something, obviously, where we're all together, but I can easily talk to people in Europe or in America, but getting the overlap is, ironically, is difficult. So I'm always available. Like I often have a chat with Alan in the States. So I mean, maybe we could do some 3-way chats, and we to get the most content, and we can record that, and then we can share things. And I can jump on.
And I think these
when I
recordings
can
were
with the
really
European
helpful.
ones.
Yeah, the recordings were really helpful. I watched both meeting 1 and meeting 2, and I feel like I was there. Like that, I feel like I got that context. I wasn't able to comment, but the fact that like these are recorded is really helpful. And I feel like there's a lot more to go into with Ian's codex that I'd like to see. Like I'd love to see the querying demo. I'd love to have that recorded somewhere as well, so that I can like send someone to go to this point in this video and watch Ian show off querying. So yeah, I think that's a good practice.
Do
I can
y'all,
send you some links to YouTube as well.
I know Ian's been working on Codex as a kind of a platform to spin off all kinds of other applications and creations. I wonder if y'all see any kind of future where we take all the various things that we're working on independently and have it work together in some way. You know, like, is it a point where we could build off of Codex or build off of Mentor? You know, it would be great to link arms in some of this.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we can have like 2 time slots, like 2 official time slots, and then that it's like suited for US and also for Australia too. And then we can just like bounce, like 1 week is this and the other one is that, or maybe we can have some of that, and then we can record all of them, and then we can just start discussing. Paul, it's need to send me like a repo so I can put all these notes and all these like links and everything. It would be nice to have that, so maybe we can also just like comment on those things. And when Minter's ready, we can also have like something like that. So because we can have also comments and it will be awesome to share knowledge like this over there. So
Oh, as well. Okay. I guess I could share this real quick and we can talk about it. Oh, actually, let me go over here and I had a really good day working on this yesterday, and then ran into some bundler problems at the end of the day, which are just absolutely the worst. When your bundler won't, is complaining that it's getting circular references to classes and stuff, and you can't figure out exactly why. It's just the worst. Let me see here. I've got the article as a page. I just want to uncomment something out that was fixing my bundler problem, and then I'll talk about it really briefly here. There it is, article page MD. Bring that back, and then bring in the Markdown visualizer here. Markdown visualizer. I think that should do it. And let's see, do we have it? Yes, we do. Okay, cool. So yeah, I think the article is fairly self-explanatory. So I'm going to go through it really quickly, and then if you guys want to ask questions or contribute to it, I'm very open to comments, feedback, anything here. So again, my goal here is to like motivate basically explain what standoff markup is by comparing it to things that most developers would be familiar with, like Markdown and HTML, and just talk about how, like, so the very beginning of the article is just saying, is really just a description of the way it works. It's not trying to say how, powerful it is or any of that kind of stuff. And so I want to build up to like, here's how to think about representing rich text in several different ways, and then kind of give them several different visualizations to be able to explore it. And then I'm going to start slipping in the like, what if we wanted to do this in Markdown? Oh, you can't do that in Markdown. Oh, what if you want to do this in HTML? Oh, you can't do that in HTML. Well, here's how you do it in Standoff. Huh. And then just kind of like build on that like a snowball rolling downhill of like, there's so much that you can do. And so let's see. And see it, Ian. So then the standoff markup, what I was referring to as well, the other thing I'll comment on and then I'll stop, is I'm hoping to add these little, these very simple little integrations into where you can actually see stuff. And then click. Oh wait. Oh, how did I do this? Did I do it here? Yeah. So yeah, there we go. So like little like mini editors where you can experiment with where the user can be manipulating rich text, because that's what they're most familiar with some simple rich text annotation buttons, and then they can see how that translates into Markdown. And then I just don't have it set to update right now. It should be updating this rich text box with this Markdown box as you update this. So this is like a mini editor, and I'm hoping to use that in a couple different places. Like I'll have one of those right here for Markdown. I'll have another one right here for HTML, so you'll be able to see a single string of HTML being emitted from some rich text. And then I'll present the tree, and then you can kind of move. I want to visualize how Markdown and HTML are hierarchical, because I think having an understanding of a tree versus a list of annotations is an important concept for people to get in their heads, because I'm going to use that concept later to say like, okay, well, with a tree, you have to decide which node does this node live under, and that actually creates problems for like representation. And so I'm going to have an editor where as they're editing the rich text, they can see the tree shifting on the fly, which could be cool. And I may even do like drag and drop of the tree. Like you can drag the nodes around on the tree, and then it updates the rich text, which would be kind of a cool two-way thing. And then eventually we'll get down to here's how standoff markup works. And I've already started to simplify this interface so that you can like type in here and be able to type some things, and then be able to add annotations. And I've already limited the annotations to be, you can only add a bold and an italic. And then you can see it automatically italicized and that kind of stuff. So they start to get a feeling for the standoff data structure. And then I wrote this list on the board yesterday during my live stream, and I went ahead and brought it into the article as kind of like placeholders, how to deal with line breaks and blocks, how to deal with grapheme clusters, emojis, Unicode, and then dealing with media. Okay. So that's where I'm going.
Love it. Love it. If as you said, like the snowball effect near the end where you start blowing people's minds. I know for Ian, the one where people started to get it would be a case of like a complex highlight, where you would normally say, okay, I'm going to highlight a sentence. So if you add that to like, okay, now guess what? You can add another highlight within there. You can break apart the words and then maybe add something to it, like just showing how easy that is. That's usually where people's minds go like, okay, this is incredible.
Well, so what was can you be more descriptive about that?
So
use
like,
case?
I'll try and come up with,
here we are.
Something on the fly, right? So, I've got in front of me on the screen, CPaaS, communications platform as a service, right? So, and maybe that is, the sentence is important. Like Twilio is the greatest CPaaS in the history of the world. I want to hold on to that highlight, right? But now I also want to dig into CPaaS because that's an acronym. Okay, so I'm going to highlight it, but also maybe add, here's the acronym for it. And then actually, as an acronym, it's a pretty loaded, layered acronym, right? Communications platform. Okay, so platform. Okay, as a service. Okay, so platform as a service is different than communications platform as a service, right? So that's just the first. There's, I'm sure, better examples like Declaration of Independence. You could probably find an example in there, right? Where it's like, here's a sentence, but these parts need to be broken out. They're all interesting on their own. I don't want, obviously you want to keep it simple, but that's where heads usually explode.
One of the ones that I thought of that I've noticed on the web, I think I might have mentioned this to Horatio or like on a previous call, is HTML only supports a string of text can only link to one thing. Like you can't nest links inside of each other. You can't link a single piece of text to multiple different things. And people want to do that.
Yes.
We actually have folk practices on the web for how to do this, right? You've seen it where there's a phrase of text that
Yeah.
links to every, and we arbitrarily choose like words in that phrase to link to different things. And like as readers, we've come to understand what that means. That like each of these texts, or sorry, each of these
one
links
different.
refers to something about this phrase.
Oh, yeah.
Or we have like the square bracket 1, square bracket 2, square bracket 3, square bracket 4 at the end of a
Inside
phrase.
a master bracket. Yeah.
Yeah, that like
Like
refers
list.
and
Yeah.
yep.
Yeah. There
So
you go.
this is a limitation of HTML in the browser that is completely unnecessary. But what people don't understand is that it's actually a limitation of the encoding. Right? This isn't. It's not that like browser authors are lack creativity to be able to show you multiple links from a single piece of text. It's no. You can't encode this in HTML. It's like literally illegal to do this.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
That's why I think the highlighter example is really good, because
Mhm.
lots of people will have overlapped a blue highlight and a yellow highlight. It might look
Mhm.
odd, but it works, and
Yeah.
it's tractable to them, and it speaks exactly to your point that the limit is not that it's not possible to do. The limit is the way it's encoded.
And you're
Yeah.
actually breaking the meaning of those links, because you're linking to a part of that sentence which makes sense in the whole sentence. So
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah, you
very
can do
and
such
so-
awful workarounds in Rome or Logseek and Logseek is better because you can have aliases. But yeah, I would have such crazy workarounds so that ugly text, just so that I could have like client, the name, and know that it is a child of client type, which is, and the kind of Tana thing. But you could really make Tana a lot more simple with standoff.
Yep. And so I think that once I show that example, I'm going to have this big bolded call out quote part of the article, and I've got to figure out how to make it really punchy. But what I want to say is the encoding format places limits on the capabilities of both the author and the editor and the reader. Like the encoding, like the capabilities of everything you build on top of it is limited by how you choose to encode. HTML as an encoding has these limitations. Markdown has these limitations. Standoff has far fewer limitations. And then basically start to build on. That's where the snowball really starts rolling. Is like, great, I've given you one example that you've actually already seen. You've seen on the internet how people do this, and they are working around a limitation of the encoding layer. Now let me show you some more things that you can do with standoff, and then like just basically get more and more complexity into like, wow, standoff can do. Wow, I think transclusions are really interesting. Deeply hypertextual stuff, like Adam was mentioning, is really fascinating too. Delinearizing text.
That's very interesting. I want to see more on that. I want to see a lot more on that.
I think it lends itself to VR/AR. So not so much 3D, but sort of 2 and a bit D.
Yeah, I mean,
being able
like
to pull your data layers out of it.
Position doesn't have to be just at the string, right? Position can be whatever. So I'm very intrigued about how that works.
Yep. Elio at SoftSpace. Have you guys seen the SoftSpace demos? He's one of the other people that I've tried to standoff pill of like, you should totally be representing this in standoff. Like I'm becoming a bit of a shill these days, but I see it everywhere.
You have a T-shirt with standoff.
Yeah, exactly.
Should get a very creative slogan with standoff. Stand off your ground.
Stand off, stop looking at me.
Yeah. I was hoping that these talks would be called standoffs. Anyway, I threw in a little link to Edward Tufte's CSS because just for the sake of a demo, I always I can imagine it being pretty powerful. Like in the case of we were talking about definitions or entities, if you let the user say, okay, I'm going to make this part of the entity its own little thing, and then you see it pop off over to the right, like a little filigree, little CSS filigree for a noob. It feels like, oh, this is so different, Anyway,
that's awesome. Yeah, I love that CSS. That's gorgeous.
And I remember trying to use it, and it's absolutely horrendous to write in. So you can imagine immediately what it's going to look like. Just getting it to look like that is hard. But again, that sort of I find that sort of example quite useful for people because it's quite accessible. Because again, it's showing where the hardness sort of lies in two ways. One in terms of you got to get the abstraction right, but the other thing sort of is how it reflects back on the author. Because one of the things I sort of taken from writing hypertextual resources for people on a very noddy level, but basically just doing static hypertext, but nonetheless thinking about how you abstract. In other words, it's all very well saying just write it in one place and then reuse it. Turns out it's a bit harder than that, and it's a bit like the something that I've really noticed with people who are stepping up from using sort of basic wiki markdown type things is you end up with a conversation, someone saying, well, how do I make a link because I can't type a square bracket here? And right, you're trying to make a link. Okay, well, the link doesn't have to be the name of the thing, so it's unpacking that. So it's having the richness. And I think it's really interesting because I think it also loops around to potentially have a good influence on much richer writing tools.
Who wants to make a standoff GPT startup and get 500K from BetaWorks?
Well, add blockchain on the end, you can have double the funding or something.
Oh man, this is awesome. A lot of good ideas here. A lot of good ideas. Well, I don't know if you want
Horatio, thank you for coordinating these. I really appreciate the work that you're putting in of setting up the call, coordinating the time, like taking notes and posting that to GitHub, posting the video recording. Like I do some of this sometimes for Tools Without Rocks, and I know it's not a small amount of effort. So thank you.
I do this because I love standoff, and I believe I believe in the power. So let's just bring it out there. So yeah.
Just briefly, where is sort of ground center for standoff as a? So I mean, apart from it says the small caucus, but is there at the moment any sort of a central reference to it if one wants to start pointing people at it?
I think what Jess is working on would be the first.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Jess could be.
That's one of the reasons I started creating it is because I literally had nothing to point people to. There's a section in Wikipedia under overlapping markup that represents that talks about standoff. And I point people that sometimes it's not nearly sufficient, but it is accurate, which is not always true of technical topics in Wikipedia.
And there are some academic documents and the text encoding initiatives have some standoff.
You should definitely link to that stuff.
I saw it. Ian certainly related to a point. I know. I just ironic. I mean, I've just submitted literally this morning a paper which is sort of 60 years of hypertext and drawing some things, and it's so frustrating that I wasn't in a position to sort of come this highlight up because one of the points was, well, people keep saying we got the web hypertext done. What is there to offer? And yet, here we are. We're pulling forward some of the really early rich notions, dusted or. The really interesting thing I found when you're hearing things described is it would be perfectly possible for this to just have been started again and ended up slightly different. But what's actually quite interesting is this looks very familiar, albeit I'm seeing things written in sort of a JavaScript type form that probably people would have done back in some kind of an XML or SGML. But I don't think that's a useful distinction to make. That's, and as someone said to me when I was looking up some papers for Adam yesterday, said, well, you have to remember that it took millions of dollars of equipment and a room full of coders just to move a bit of text across the screen, and look at what we're now doing in a browser, and it's easy sort of to forget that, but yet nonetheless it's really exciting actually to see that some of the things that go right the way back to the ideas of sort of Engelbart and Nelson are just happily still there and still as powerful and working really well.
Yeah, I think I found some references that they used standoff type structures in Xerox PARC in the 1979, I think, for some sort of desktop publishing format. I think it was called Press that then became Interpress, and then it lost all those standoff qualities. But and that became PostScript. But they used it for desktop publishing back then. But it's hard to decode all those formats. It's kind of because they had such a different notion of files and directories and tape, and so it's hard to decode it in modern brains.
If
Oh,
you
gotcha.
want to put
Jess, I know
people
I
off
got the white
PDF,
paper
just
somewhere.
tell them how
Oh,
Postgres
okay.
written. Alan, sorry.
There's a talk by Blaine Cook of @JSON that goes into the history of Markdown or standoff. I had forgotten
Okay.
about that one.
Okay.
And he actually talks about, you know, where he does a great job of motivating like where Markdown came from, and kind of going back to some of the historical formats that led to a Markdown style format. And then and he also has some great great
And that guy
quotes.
definitely the paper, the guy who coined the term should definitely be recognized, right? Like
Mhm.
I think Ian's even talked with him. But it's weird. He's in a totally different circle.
The first time I heard about standoff was based on some Ian's work.
Yeah.
So actually, we thought that Ian's it was the one that coins the word like standoff.
No, but I think he should be credited for popularizing it. I don't know
Yeah.
if Blaine came to it independently, but the first I ever heard of startup was from
Ian.
standoff was from Ian, and Ian seemed to get it directly from this guy.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
But
there's a
reading
couple
his
papers
paper.
that I've seen.
There have also been other terms like external markup was a word I used for a long time in my circles, and also sidecar files are similar.
Mhm.
And that is also a very old concept. So
Yes.
we may need to look for other words and terms for it.
Oh,
And
so
I'm
yeah.
okay with I've actually talked about this a little bit when I've been working on standoff. I'm okay if standoff's not the right word, like the big word for it. It seems like it is, but like I would be fine with standardizing under another term, if there's a better one.
Yeah.
Yeah, please, if you find those links or those references, put it in the Discord channel. I can add them to the repo that I'm filling it up right now, but until we have access to the other one, but at least we can have them over there.
It's so hard to search for codex now that there's another codex.
Yeah, they're gonna have to rebrand. Sorry, your brand space has been eaten by OpenAI. You lose.
Awesome. Well, guys, I'm sorry, but I need to go.
Yeah, me too.
So it's been
Desmond
super
Schmidt.
fun.
Yeah. Go ahead.
It's been super fun. I wish we can continue doing this and try to like actually take action and help Jess with this document. Maybe fill up other more like little snippets or of little details about standoff, what it is, and maybe we can just write up about how we all are using standoff, so we can see, so people can see many ways that these concepts are being used in real applications, because that's where people can imagine better and do and fill up their imagination with other things. So thanks again. This is recorded. I'm gonna push the meeting notes, and then when the video is ready, I will put the link also. So thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right. Thanks, Horatio.
Thank you, man.
Have a good one.
See you around.